local engagement through disaster preparedness. This morning there was a free pancake breakfast at the local fire department, and it was all geared towards disaster preparedness. And Laura is very much responsible for some of those activities. And Laura was the individual responsible for maintaining the Ventura County Emergency Operations Center as a job. And she's also working here with the city to help Port Hueneme residents be prepared in the event of a disaster by promoting and organizing the CERT program, Community Emergency Response Training. And if you're interested in that, we'll be able to give you information on that as well. Laura was raised in Ventura County, has been a resident of Port Hueneme for over 20 years. Currently, she's a consultant helping organizations become better prepared for disasters. She serves as chair of the Port Hueneme Citizen Corps Council and an adjunct professor in management and human resources for California State University Northridge. She's also taught classes at the local Cal State University Channel Islands. So with that, please welcome Laura Hernandez.
Thank you, Stephen. I don't know that I need the mic. How does it sound? Okay? All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. What I want to do today is talk about emergency preparedness and civic engagement. And all of you are doing your part right now to become involved and educated and aware of the importance of disaster preparedness. So I congratulate you for being here. It's not the most sexiest topic, and it's unfortunately we don't always draw the crowds that we would like, but you are the chosen few who are going to be prepared when we have the big one. What I want to do this morning is make a case for preparedness and make a case for becoming involved in preparedness. And I want to share you lessons learned on how to become involved, what to do and what not to do, based on my personal experience over the course of 30 years being in the field of emergency management. I've had the opportunity to respond and be part of some significant disasters, which we'll talk about. Some you'll recognize. And I just kind of want to share my experiences, my stories about what I learned from those events. So this slide here is a recent slide. It's some volunteers from our Listos program who they went through a Spanish language training on how to be responsive to a disaster. Listos is a disaster preparedness program that's designed for Spanish speaking. It's like CERT, it's like this Community Emergency Response Team training, but you don't do the heavy lifting. And these volunteers learned how to be trainers. They went through a train-the-trainer program, and they were kind enough to take the time out of their day to assist with the smoke alarm program that was conducted here a couple of months ago, working collaboratively with the fire department and helping install smoke alarms in the homes of residents. So what is civic engagement? We typically don't use the term civic engagement when we talk about disaster preparedness. So I pulled the definition offline here, and it says civic engagement is an umbrella term used to describe the activities which promote the bridging of communities with socially conscious thought and action. And then you can read the rest for yourself. So typically when you hear about civic engagement, you're going to think, oh, well, I want to get involved in income inequality, or I want to get involved in women's rights, or I want to get involved in saving our beaches. And typically disaster preparedness doesn't fall on the list. But hopefully through the course of my discussion, I'll be able to demonstrate to you how disaster preparedness planning and getting involved in disaster preparedness really does bring communities together and can be a useful cause in organizing your neighborhoods. And I apologize if I sound a little academic. I teach, and so my presentation tends to be a little on the academic side. But feel free, if you have any questions during the course of my presentation, to raise your hands and ask any questions. So what I'm going to cover is why we don't prepare, why we need, why we need the civic-minded, people like yourselves, what does it look like, lessons learned in donation and volunteer management, and how to be a part of. So not everyone gets it. Not everyone understands the importance of being prepared. And what I tried to do this morning in talking to people at the pancake breakfast was to break preparedness into bite-sized chunks. Every time you go to the store, pick up something that's going to help you prepare. Our water systems are very fragile. If we have a major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault, that could interrupt service to Ventura County via the aqueduct. The aqueduct crosses the San Andreas Fault. If we can't get water to Ventura County, we are going to be in dire straits. So pick up an extra bottle of water. Pick up a case of water while you're at the store. Grab a package of batteries. Do it in bite-sized pieces. So every time you go to the store, you've picked up something that can go into your emergency supply kit. It's very manageable. It takes very little time, and it's not that expensive. And it will save you, your family, and your pets, your loved ones, a lot of suffering and heartache and loss. It could help prevent that following a major disaster. But why don't people prepare? There's actually been studies that have been done. Cal Lutheran, in fact, did a study for Ventura County when I was the assistant director there for Office of Emergency Services. And we found out several things. One, a lot of people think it won't happen here. It won't happen to me. If it happens, it won't be that bad. If it is that bad, there's nothing I can do. If it does happen, it is that bad, first responders will be here to help us. And now, I've added one to the list. Others will come to our aid. And that's what we're going to talk about. Those civic-minded people who come to the assistance of others. We saw that in the Thomas Fire, right? We saw that in the Thomas Fire. Everybody wants to get involved. Everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon and assist their neighbor. We saw it to almost a very extreme, to the very extreme, I should say. So why do we need the civic-minded? We're a small city. We're about 4.2 square miles, 23,000 people here in the city of Port Hueneme. We have 3 trained EMT firefighters on duty at any one time. We have a handful of police officers on duty at any one time. So if you look at the ratio of first responders to the number of people within our city, you can see very clearly that there's not enough services to go around, that we are going to be on our own in the first hours following an emergency. In fact, studies have also shown that volunteers are the first responders. People who are prepared and know what to do are the first responders in those first few hours after a major disaster. So we need people like you. We need the civic-minded. So what does it look like when we think about people who rush to volunteer and assist during emergencies? We think of people helping serve food, helping clean up after a disaster, helping mitigate against potential flooding, which looks like what they're doing, maybe building some kind of fence there. But it's also personal preparedness. And so being personally responsible, exercising some self-responsibility for your own family, your own home is a place to start. And it is, in fact, being part of being civically engaged when you take care of yourself first. It's like putting on the mask, the oxygen mask. You have to put it on yourself first before you put it on somebody else. You got to take care of yourself first and be ready before you can help somebody else. So this is what it looks like. But this is what can happen as well. And this is what we saw during the Thomas Fire. If you don't know how to help, if you don't know the lessons learned from previous disasters, donation management and volunteer management can be a misnomer. It is out of control. There is chaos. I went to Ralph's Market during the Thomas Fire and could not find water on the shelves because people who sincerely, in their good hearts, felt they were doing something good, depleted the water in the grocery stores to deliver it to the volunteer, the donations sites that were established for the Thomas Fire. So they were depleting the water. Water wasn't needed. The people collecting donations were overwhelmed by water. They had to turn people away because people had donated water. And then the worst thing is the donation of clothes. And the clothes come in all stages of repair, disrepair. Clothes is the worst thing to ask for in a disaster, but yet people were donating clothes, and they were just dumping them off at these donation spots that had been established. Many churches wanted to stand up and be part of the solution, but what they found is that they soon became part of the problem because they had collected all these clothes and had nowhere to deliver them. And in the end, it became a real nightmare for the organization, who had to finally come in and move the clothes by truckload and take them to somebody like the Goodwill who would take them and process them. But if you are not prepared to receive donations, you have to be really careful, because it can overwhelm an organization. You can spend all your time sifting through clothes, sifting through donated goods, and it can take away from the other responsibilities or the other things that need to be done. Maybe like getting preparedness information out, maybe going into neighborhoods and helping people clean up after an earthquake or a flood or debris. So it can be very overwhelming. So what I want to do is, so there's a right and there's a wrong way to get involved. So I want to talk about the Northridge earthquake. How many of you remember the Northridge earthquake? Okay, I was living here on Hollywood Beach, and it happened at 4:31 in the morning, something like that. We were shaken out of bed. Oh, 6:30? Okay.
I remember.
Yeah, I know it was dark out and it was early in the morning, and the shaking was so severe that certainly most people were up and awake. Now, I was working for Santa Monica Fire Department at the time. I was the emergency manager for the city of Santa Monica, and I could not get into work. I had no communications to find out where this earthquake epicenter was. Was there damage? Were the roads open? Did I need to go in? Was it a localized emergency? We did not have the technology we have now to even determine where the epicenter was. Now you can get that information right away. Why do you think knowing where the epicenter is important when we have something that shakes as bad as the Northridge earthquake?
That's where the most damage is.
That could be where the most damage is, but us being a beach community, what do you think that could mean for us? Tsunami, right? So if you have maybe a 5.5 or greater, with the epicenter on or near the ocean floor, we could have a tsunami here. So that means that folks who live along the coast, along the beach, need to start moving away. And we have tsunami maps that direct you on how to do that. But I digress away from the Northridge earthquake. So Northridge earthquake, I finally made it into Santa Monica. I was in the emergency operations center for 2 weeks before I saw the light of day and before I actually got out to see the damage that occurred in Santa Monica. Now, volunteers and people who wanted to assist were calling our phones in the emergency operations center, and were overwhelming us. We didn't have a volunteer coordinator in our EOC at the time. I was taking a lot of the calls. I had a call from San Diego, a group that wanted to drive all the way down from San Diego to help us with what we called at the time our property retrieval program. We were actually going into red tag buildings. Those were buildings that were severely damaged, and the fire department was shoring up the buildings long enough and secure enough so that the fire department could go in there and retrieve people's personal belongings and important documents and things like that. So that was a program that we implemented. We needed help with people moving things out of these buildings, especially for people who were elderly. So I had a group of people who wanted to come down from San Diego. They kept calling and calling. I said, I don't really know that we can use you, but if you'd like to come, we'll try to find something for you. And they said, okay, we'll come. And so they started heading down. They go, oh, by the way, we need a place to stay. And so I got charged with, okay, we'll find you a place to stay. So had an agreement with a hotel across the street, and we reserved some rooms for them and had a place to stay. They finally made it down. I was leaving the EOC that night. It was about 10:30, and I was, a van had pulled up with it was filled with people, 2 vans. And I walked up, I said, oh, are you the volunteers from San Diego? And I looked inside, and both vans were filled with children, teenagers, 10 to 16 to 17-year-old, developmentally disabled kids. They were the volunteers from San Diego. And I said, oh my God, what kind of liability did I just get myself into here? I told them where their rooms were at the hotel to go check in, and I didn't sleep well that night, thinking about what we were going to do with them in the morning. But it turned out it worked out fine. They found a place where they could be of assistance. They did their thing for a few days, and then they headed back home. But it worked out, thank God. I had a minister, for instance, who had blankets, and he kept following me around and asking me, what can I do with these blankets? I said, you take them to the shelter. We had a shelter with hundreds of people who had been evacuated from their homes. And he had these blankets, and he just kept wanting me to take on these blankets. And I said, you know, you take them to the shelter. Oh, no, but they're nice blankets. They can't just be for anyone. So things like that can be really, so that was a lesson learned. You know, we really need somebody to handle volunteers and volunteer management, to know what they're doing, and to put some controls and parameters on that. So that was my story with the Northridge earthquake when it came to volunteers and donation management. Oklahoma City bombing. April 19th, 1995, I was still working for Santa Monica Fire Department, and my sister was married to a state senator, or still is married to a state senator in Oklahoma, and we were on the phone, and she had been downtown when the bomb exploded, and she called me and says, do you want to come and help? I said, yeah, I would love to come and help in their Emergency Operations Center. Most people who were dying to get down there to help wanted to be on scene. I knew that my role would be in the background somewhere in the Emergency Operations Center. So I flew out that afternoon, got there that night. My brother-in-law had a hotel room for me because all the hotel rooms were taken up. I had called the State Emergency Operations Center, and they didn't have a city EOC, they didn't have a county EOC. Their Emergency Operations Center was the state EOC. That's where they did all the coordination of the response for the Oklahoma City bombing. They did have some advanced operations on site, incident command posts and all that on site, but the EOC that I went to was actually located miles away from where the event had occurred. So I showed up that night at the EOC, and there had been a volunteer on the phone managing all the donated requests for donations and offers of donations and offers of volunteers, and there were a lot. We're talking Oklahoma, the Bible Belt, people from all over the United States were offering assistance. So you definitely need people to staff the phones and help with monitoring and managing people who are offering assistance. When I got there, I talked to the EOC director, said, Laura, thank you for coming. Please relieve this gentleman here. He's been here longer than he needs to be. He needs to go home. You're welcome to go and tell him you're his relief. This guy, you get people who don't want to leave. They've been working 24-hour shifts and they don't want to leave. They don't want to go home and get rest or get sleep. And, you know, after you go without sleep for a while, you're not so effective. And you could be part of the problem in an EOC environment if you're not taking care of yourself. So I went up to the individual and I said, hi, my name's Laura. I'm here to relieve you. I'm told that you can go home, get some rest. And he goes, no, I'm fine. And he goes, well, wait a minute. Why don't you do this? Why don't you call this person here and tell her we don't need her? And I looked at the slip, and it said, woman from California, Santa Monica Fire Department is offering to come and assist. And that was me. And that was me. So he eventually did go. But one thing that happened it's a lesson that I'll never forget is somebody, the rescuers in the Alfred P. Monroe building needed heat and light during the night to conduct the rescue. And they needed space heaters, and they needed space heaters is what they needed. They needed heat because it was getting very cold at night. So the request came up to the Emergency Operations Center because the field did not have that resource. So it came to the Emergency Operations Center, and the EOC director said, we need to find some space heaters. And good old Roy pulled the slip off out of his hand and says, I can get you space heaters. So what he did is he got on TV and he said, we need space heaters at the Alfred P. Monroe building. And he put out the number, the main phone number to the Emergency Operations Center. I had walked out of the EOC for a few moments and then came back into the front desk area, and the secretaries in the front desk area were going nuts. I said, what happened? He said, Roy put the main line on TV. Everybody is calling about their space heaters. And the interesting thing was, she goes, you know, this is Oklahoma. We take too long to say what we have to say anyway. And these people were, I've got a space heater. It's been in my garage for 13 years. I can get it out, but unless you really need it, I don't really want to bother with it, but I will send it to you. But do you think I can get it back? You know, and you get engaged in these conversations with people on the phone. The phones were ringing off the hook. So the best we could do was take their names and say, we'll call you if we need you. And what they did with that list, hundreds of people who called, they gave it to Roy and said, Roy, you have the responsibility of calling everybody back. So you have to be careful about how you ask and what you ask for, right? Alaska Flight 261, right here off our coast. I was sitting on an interview panel, and at 4:21, I felt the earth move. I felt like a bump. I was at the government center. Now, I don't know what that was. I'm just saying I felt something. And I'm very sensitive, hypersensitive to earthquakes. I got a phone call from my staff member, Dale, and he says, boss, we just had an airplane crash. I said, where? It was right off the coast of Anacapa, off the coast of Hueneme, Anacapa Island. Is it commercial or private? Is it commercial? Passengers? Yes, we have passengers. I said, okay, I'll meet you down in the Emergency Operations Center. Let's get the EOC activated and decide what our next steps are going to be. I was the first one down in the EOC. The phones were already ringing off the hook. The press is always going to be ahead of you. So I answered the phone. It's a CBS New York. What are you doing to respond to the aircraft disaster? All we could say is we're opening up our EOC and we're preparing to support the federal agencies who will be in charge. We were working that incident for 7 weeks, helping the families, supporting the federal agencies who were coming in to do the investigation. Luckily, we were able to relocate from our Emergency Operations Center onto the base, and we were part of the incident command system, and we did daily briefings twice a day with all the, we had over 72 different agencies who responded to that event. The community here was amazing. I've never seen Fort Hueneme come together like they did for Alaska 261. There were offers of food, there was offers of mental health services, there were flowers, people taking flowers to the beach, people wanting to help the families. When the families came into town, the people were here to line the sidewalks and to offer their support, and to just even a simple way, just to come out when the buses came in. People were lining the streets and waving to and sharing their condolences with the family members, and that meant a lot to them. We had boaters and fishermen who responded that evening to help retrieve remains out in the ocean. These were volunteer fishermen who used their boats because our Coast Guard had one boat, and I don't know how soon other Coast Guard resources came in, but this is an example of where volunteers are the first responders, are people who are just converged and organized and come in to assist. And the boaters would come in and they brought everything into the port, and they would drop their loads off at the port, and the fire department would decontaminate the remains and the airplane pieces and everything. But the unfortunate thing about the boaters and the fishermen was that once they were done, they went home, and we didn't know who they were or didn't have a record of who they were. So weeks into the event, we started getting calls. Calls from girlfriends, from wives, from mothers saying, my son or my husband was out on those fishing boats retrieving remains, and now he is having problems. He's drinking too much, he's acting out, we need some help. So, the big lesson learned there is you have to have a method for following up with these groups. The guys on the ship who were going out daily to retrieve parts of the plane and retrieve the remains of the victims had a need later on. 7 weeks into it, they were having problems. We lost 2 Coast Guards who had to retire and go out on disability because of the horrific things that they had to do in that response. So we have to take care of our volunteers. I had people come in from other counties, other cities to assist me because my span of control was beyond control. I needed to be able to delegate to people. I made sure every one of them went through critical incident stress debriefing. So it's really important to take care of your volunteers. So this is just a slide here. Fishing crews take on gruesome task of recovering crashed remains. So, yeah. Brings back memories, doesn't it? But this is just a display of the community's support that we got here from Port Hueneme. We had search and rescue volunteers, we had restaurants and stores donate food, we had, of course, American Red Cross Salvation Army, we had a lot of help from people during the memorial services, a lot of people put out thank you banners. So the community really came together during that. But then they go away, and they don't come together again until something else happens. And that's just human nature, right? That's just human nature. So one of the ways that we try to get people involved and get people engaged in disaster preparedness is to provide training. This is the Listos program I spoke about earlier, the disaster preparedness for the Spanish-speaking. And, these programs are just not only disaster preparedness programs. This picture here is a picture of a 10-year-old Charlie who had attended the Listos training with his mother. And the parents of these children who attend these trainings don't want their children to be off being cared for in a child care setting. They want their children sitting right next to them participating in the training. So Charlie actually helped with the training. He sat in with his parents and was not really a graduate because he was too young to be a graduate of the course, but the fire chief did call him up during graduation and award him with a simple fire department badge. And he said, Charlie, he goes, in 10 more years, I want to see you here applying for a position with the fire department. And for a lot of people, this is their first positive interaction with a first responder. Most of the time, people's interaction with a police officer or firefighters when they're in trouble, right? Or they need assistance. So this program does a lot to bring together community and first responders in a very positive way. So that had an impact on Charlie, and maybe set him on a trajectory for his life to be something, to be a first responder, maybe a firefighter. We have started our Citizen Corps program here in Fort Hueneme. The idea behind the Citizen Corps program is to include all the community stakeholders and volunteer groups who raise awareness and provide education about disaster preparedness. We have a small but mighty group of people. We have the schools involved, the fire department involved, police department, chamber of commerce, and then we're trying to get the HOAs, HOA leadership involved, so that they can help communicate information down into their communities. We have a lot of, and Red Cross, we have a lot of HOAs here in Fort Hueneme, and wouldn't it be nice if all the HOAs could get their residents organized enough so that they know how to check on their neighbors after a major emergency, help their neighbors, and then communicate up to the police department, fire department on their needs. That's the goal. That's what we want to do. So this picture here is a picture of the workshop that we just conducted several weeks ago. Not very well attended, unfortunately. Well, we had about 20 people. And we had the fire department there. We had Myrene talk from Hueneme Bay on some of the things that she's doing at Hueneme Bay. You always get the carpenters. These people will come out and these are probably one of the most civic-minded people in the city, and they care about being prepared. And they sat through the entire workshop. We need more people like them, right? So my case for disaster preparedness is that it is like apple pie, mom and pop apple pie. It's not controversial. It is a legitimate and proven way to get involved in your neighborhood. It's a way to meet your neighbors, a way to support your first responders. And when I talk about first responders, I mean police and fire and EMS and your sanitation workers and your street workers, all the people who are going to be out putting the city back together after a major earthquake. So word of mouth is an effective way to communicate. And so your challenge today is to go back and talk to your neighbors, talk to people you know, pick up something at the market that you can add to your emergency kit, and help support a successful disaster preparedness program in Fort Hueneme, so we can become a better Fort Hueneme and better prepared community. Being involved could save a life, maybe your own, maybe your loved one, maybe, Boomer. Are you prepared for Boomer? If Boomer has to evacuate, do you have food in your car? No. So I have cat food in my car for my cat. So it's something to think about, something to ponder. I am happy to take any questions. That concludes my presentation.